Thanks a lot, Prof, for agreeing to talk to us. I'm also an avid reader of your work, and we really thought that we would have a fruitful discussion. We've been having a series of online chats with academics in camera from different locations to try to sort of tone down the discussions that we have in academic spaces so that they also can be accessible to different audiences online, which is really trying to bring academics to talk about their work in an accessible way, but at the same time also allow the work to speak for itself through some sort of references as well to popular culture and to sort of ongoing political dynamics within the context that we find ourselves in. So we've tried to frame the discussion not only around theoretical conversations, but maybe in some ways implicitly draw connections from your work without digging too much into it substantively, but at the same time allowing us to still use your work as a frame of reference to understand sort of socio-political dynamics.
But now you want a theoretician to be practical. How will I do that?
The first question I wanted to ask you, Prof, is around just to get a sense of how you've been keeping yourself entertained, how you've been keeping yourself busy. I don't know if entertained is the right word because you're quite a busy man. But how have you been outside your work, or in the intersections between your work and in your personal life? How have you been, coping and keeping busy and happy?
Okay. Generally, I'm not too much into the social. Academia to me is my social. I don't normally speak a lot in the social context. So I might actually say I'm more of a, what do they call these characters? Those who don't speak too much, and my compensation for that is that I communicate more through writing than speaking. But because of the industry I work in, particularly academia, over the years, I have also developed the skills of speaking in public. But to keep my sanity together, the more I'm depressed, the more I read. The more I face social problems, the more I write. So I really deal with the stress that way. And perhaps the other second part of how I have survived this far, unlike most of the people, I actually married very late in life. So I've not been having the burden of balancing between children and the academia. I thought I will do my academic work up to 40 years. And then after that, think whether I will have a family or not. So, but in between, I ended up having a child. Of course, my son is 23 years, the eldest. So, and it became very interesting that his presence in my life gave me meaning, really, why I'm doing what I'm doing. But then I have also younger children, two of them. One is 4 years old, the other one is 1 year, 7 months. So from that experience of having been a single parent, I kept my son when he was 5. We stayed together without a mother. So he has been a lieutenant. When I married, then I have these other younger ones who also demand my attention. So really, I've learned very late in life to balance between the academia and the social. And it seems to be working well. And what I can say really briefly is that children are another another full-time job to look after, to make them happy, as they also make you happy. So, but the fourth aspect, which I can say, is that I don't take writing really. I don't take it as a burden. Writing and reading, to me, is in my blood. I just enjoy it. Because of that, I've never had what we call writer's block. I'll be lying, to be honest. More and more, I feel like I've so many ideas which I want to communicate to the world. The only time does not allow. But I've never reached a stage where I say I have a writer's block. I can't write. That I hear from other colleagues, but I don't have. And I think what explains that is that, unlike other people who write what maybe is trendy or what is liked by other people, I write what I like. And when I'm saying I write what I like, I don't mean what entertains me, what actually affects me. So I link really my academic work with the questions which affect me. As you can see from my earlier work, I was really a bit angry when I was doing my work on the Ndebele state and the Ndebele identity. Coming from a minority Ndebele speaking people, when I finished my PhD, I had a bit of some anger, which up to now I can't explain very well. But there was a time when I felt I went to Form 1 up to Form 4 during the Kukuraundi times in Kwanda, and I went to high school at Popoma High during the same times. So when I came to the university and when I then was trained as a historian, I wanted to try to explain what was happening. And one of the major issues, I'm not sure whether, if you studied history, by then there was something very interesting in the history department, in the sense that the professors tended to ask, where do you come from? And when you say, I come from Matebele, and then they will think about your research topic around where you come from. And good as it is, but problematic as I will explain, because generally it then links you with your ethnicity. Then research work becomes like an ethnic defense. You get what I'm trying to say. So it then creates that issue whereby you, because of your connection with perhaps the ethnic group, you end up really producing what might sound like a patriotic history unaware, because you end up defending. So I wrote for over maybe a decade, trying to build from my PhD, which was actually on the Ndebele state from 1818 to 1934. So some of the issues which I wrote, I was actually pulling out from my PhD. And I thought I was going to be a specialist really on Ndebele history. But you remember, because of the deterioration of the economy in Zimbabwe, because of our movement out of the country, when I came to South Africa, I've never taught history ever since I came out of Zimbabwe. So my first position was at Monash University, where I was hired as a lecturer in international studies, which then the issue of the Ndebele question was no longer fitting very well into that. And when I moved to the UK after 3 years at Monash, I was lecturer in African studies at the Ferguson Center for African and Asian Studies. So I then broadened out of Zimbabwe into Africa, and perhaps into the global south. And during that time, what I can actually say, which you can actually trace from all my academic career, is that you will find out that even when I was doing the Ndebele state, the issue of decolonizing was always there. When I did my PhD in Ndebele state, the question which I was dealing with was not really an ethnic question. It was really the question of whether pre-colonial African societies have their own notions of democracy and human rights. And by then, it was a major topic in the 1990s. So I did the Ndebele state looking at the issues of their governance, looking at the issue of gender relations within that state, looking at the role of spiritualities looking at the issue of colonial encounters and all those things. So it was, and I was using by then the Gramscian approach, which I was actually, one of my examiners was Brian Raptopoulos, who was really coming from the political science, and I was coming from history, and from history we were never exposed to theory. So when I came to defend my PhD, Brian Raptopoulos pushed and they pushed so hard that, but your work is good, but the major problem, there is no theoretical anchor. And then from there, he then pushed me to read Gramsci so that I do the what we call the cohesion consent dialectic, whether the Ndebele were actually using that type of cohesion consent to create hegemony, the Kumalo hegemony maybe within the Ndebele state. So that's where I come from. And that theoretical grounding then took me to then, in another direction, theoretically, to then become interested in post-colonial theory. Yeah. And I worked with post-colonial theory during that time of the first 10 years of my academic career, until at the end of that decade, I then also got frustrated with the limits of the post-colonial theory, because what post-colonial theory was doing, it made us to concentrate more on disciplinary debates, the meta-narrative versus the other things, and it actually took us away from the question of the human problems. And it is from that I then shifted from post-colonial theory to decolonial theory, which I think decolonial theory really addresses the ever-changing problems facing humanity rather than disciplinary debates.
And speaking of which, I think I like where this conversation has landed us to this discussion about decolonization and your own sort of theoretical grounding. How do you feel that the idea of sort of decolonization has evolved, and how does it find meaning or articulate itself within movements such as Black Lives Matter and Zimbabwean Lives Matter? And I mean, and what are some of the pitfalls, for example, that come out from sort of a decolonization approach that comes from a context, for example, such as Zimbabwe? Where does one draw the line between, for example, racializing individuals and actually enacting what perhaps for you would call true decolonization?
Yeah, those are weighty questions and very difficult questions, but maybe let me come to them from my experience with the Zimbabwean studies and the Zimbabwean politics. One of the major issues I think we need to be careful to distinguish between or among nativism, anti-colonialism, and the decoloniality. I think if we don't do that, we might actually fall into the trap of seeing some things which are not really decolonial. Anti-colonialism has its own limits because it is anti, as you can tell. President Robert Mugabe, for instance, there was no doubt that he was an anti-colonial, anti-imperialist political figure. But can we say Mugabe was decolonial? I think that's where we will need to think very deeply there. Because one of the major problems is that you can be the anti-colonial, the major problem is immediately it is interpellated by the immanent logic of what it is fighting against. So you will find that an anti-colonial person, while he can have a good rhetoric against imperialism, colonialism, but in political practice, he actually imbibes and reproduces the same practices in governance. And one of the major signs that of the limits and the poverty of anti-colonial politics is when somebody who was involved in anti-colonial, anti-imperialist struggles then fails to develop love for his own people. Because that's one thing which colonialism took from black people, because it reduced them to subhuman. Therefore, they never really, they were hated people by the colonialists. And you expect that a nationalist and anti-colonial leader, when he comes to power, he will then introduce that love for the people. But he continues the same logics of actually turning a revolution really into what we call a revolution, which is it's its own children. That's one. Two, one of the major departure points from anti-colonialism and the decolonial thinking, politically speaking, you will never say people are a problem, or you say MDC are a problem, or the people of Matabeleland are a problem. You can't say that. If you are speaking such a language, you are speaking a genocidal language, which is the colonial language. What you can say, the people of Matabeleland or the people of MDC might have problems. They can't be problems themselves. You get what I'm trying to say? Yes. And that minor difference actually inaugurates different politics. When you say people have a problem, it means therefore you need to come closer to them. But comrades, what are your problems? And then you begin a dialogical politics. But if I say, is it Kudawashe and you guys, you are a problem. What I mean is therefore I must eliminate you because you are a problem. You are embodiment of problems yourselves. Your bodies are a problem in my face. And the politics I inaugurate is the politics of liquidation and the elimination. So I think that's where we need to think carefully about the people who speak very well anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, but in their political practice, they actually imbibe with the same logics. In other words, it's like being a leftist, but we are using a right-wing epistemology. You get the issues. Then you have a second problem, whereby some people then, under the same umbrella of being anti-colonial, anti-imperialist, they degenerate into nativism, like what used to be done by people like Ken Manungo, people like Chiwaura and the others, which was called the Nagayedu. That was it sounded decolonial, but it was nativist in content, because it ends up saying the mother of Jesus was black. You know, it's a very simplistic way of dealing with things. So I think it is important for us to really be careful about the traps of what the underside of what decolonization can produce. Yeah. The third issue, which I think can actually be very problematic, is to fall into the trap. You know, colonialists, they justified their domination over black people by right of conquest. And then you turn around and you say, by right of having liberated you, therefore, I also have a right to rule over you in perpetuity, and I have a right to actually own things in perpetuity. Then you create sort of what, for lack of a better term, I will call Chimrenga aristocracy. Those who fought in the liberation struggle then own everything. Then they become the richest. Then they have unlimited right to everything. What is his name? The commissar for ZANU-PF, the deputy minister for defense now, Nematanda. Nematanda, he said one day in a very interesting way, he said, if we speak in our war vet language, we just say Zimbabwean do, that's it. That's it. So once you degenerate into that is not decolonial. What we are trying to think decolonially was saying, for the first time, you needed to think, first of all, the question of the human. Those people who have been pushed to the lowest echelons of the pyramidal structure of humanity, the black people, I think they need more love than being disciplined, being killed every day. And you need to actually have sympathy with that conditionality of blackness. And once you do that, therefore you will know that they might have pitfalls of consciousness, not of their own making, but because of the way they've been produced by colonialism. And you must be empathetic to that, so that you don't see them as enemies. You get that type of thinking. And then secondly, you need to move to the higher level of saying, But how do I resolve these problems? These people who are produced by what I've been fighting against, and they carry these pitfalls of consciousness. Then you think about the education system in which you will use to actually bring them back to full humanity. Rather than what we did in Zimbabwe, the radical emulation of the British system and our attempt to actually outshine the British in their own system. You get our strength of education system, which is celebrated in the region, is really about the radical emulation of the British, that we can perform even like them or even better than them in the same system. But it is not a decolonized system of education. That's why you will find in Zimbabwe, they are no longer white people, but we still make English the most important subject out of all subjects. Even if you want to go to Dushon and develop in the university, they were always emphasizing, if you have no English, you can't do it. What type of thinking is that?
Wow.
Then it comes also to the question of power relations. Don't say because the imperialism, colonialism is all over, is not over. Then every day you are actually seeing imperialists within your own citizens, and you are saying Zogera is a sellout, this one is a sellout. Then you are unleashing violence against your own people. In other words, you are actually running away from the bigger enemy, and they're actually attacking your own people inside. And I don't think there's anything revolutionary about that. Even if imperialists are actually recruiting inside, but you must know the bigger enemy rather than those people who are recruited and make them your enemies. That is as far as I can explain how decoloniality needs to move further from anti-colonialism.
And that's so important, Prof, because I'm also thinking now about the other question that I had, which is around, and you've just made this emphasis on the difference between anti-colonialism and decolonization. And now I'm thinking about what are some of the lessons that we can think of that come from Zimbabwe when it comes to this sometimes myth of decolonization, where we or other people actually think that this is what decolonization looks like. So for other Southern African countries, for example, where we find ourselves in South Africa at the current moment, you mentioned issues around Chinuchedu in Zimbabwe, which basically translates to our thing, and Nakayedu, our heritage, and that monopolization of heritage and space. What can you say about that and its connection to current arguments in politics in South Africa, especially now because of how COVID-19 has strained access to resources and jobs, and in an existing environment that has been xenophobic for the longest time?
Yeah, in fact, I think that actually takes us to the whole question of intersubjective relations. What is the vision of intersubjective relations within a decolonial politics? You see, the major problem again about the anti-colonial is that it is about reversing the scales of power. The one who once dominated, you just change the scales upside down. You come on top. And that's why you will find President Mugabe openly saying, when we are talking about the third Chimrenga, we're talking about conquest of conquest, the conquest of secular colonialism by Zimbabwean nationalism. In other words, you have fallen into that Nietzschean trap, whereby if you were confronting monsters, you undergo monsterization of yourself, instead of actually coming out a better person. And then you repeat the same things. The problem, for instance, colonialists, Rhodesian, secular colonialists, they actually dispossessed all black people, and they used the race to do that. When you want to restore new intersubjective relations, you don't repeat the same. It becomes revenge rather than liberation. When you just say, now I will take everything from you, just like the way you took everything from me. It's a very complicated politics, because there people will say, but do you think it's possible that you can actually say this person dispossessed me And you say, but now I want to restore humanity to all of you, the Mandelian politics, if you like, which is today in South Africa is criticized heavily, of saying, but you can't say everyone is a human being, including these ones who were abusing people. But the question which I think is South Africa and Zimbabwe, they pose to us, is that we must be careful not to repeat what colonialism was doing. But at the same time, we must not have a romantic view about the perpetrator. And I don't know how we can come out of that. Mandela's argument is a very interesting one. When I followed and researched on him, Mandela said when he was taken to Robben Island, one of the things which preoccupied his mind was what type of a person is this one who arrests you on the countryside, on the land, and then he transports you to an island. Then when he reaches an island, he creates a very small cell like this, whereby you can't even turn. And then he closes you there. And he said, when he slept in that cell, what came to his mind is what type of a person can do this. And he said, I think these are people who have fallen from humanity. And what was then his response was that if I'm spared, therefore, I will actually try to save both these people who have fallen from humanity and those they are oppressing. Theoretically nice as it is, the limit of such type of politics is that then is dependent on whether human beings really have goodwill. Immediately you tell them that I want revenge, I won't do anything, I want us to move together into a new political society, they take advantage of actually monopolizing what they accumulated during apartheid, and they keep instead of actually agreeing to distribute. Then the second aspect of it is a practical limit when it comes to South Africa. The Afrikaners were not defeated militarily. What happened is that they found themselves on the wrong side of history at the end of the Cold War. But at the same time, the ANC also found itself as an orphan of the Cold War. The Soviet Union, which was sponsoring it, was no longer there. So there was no option except to negotiate, as far as I can see, as I can see it. And the issue is you are negotiating with people whom you need to, as Mandela will say, from an enemy, bringing the person nearer as an adversary, and then with an attempt to then move together with the person into a new society. So it's an interesting paradigm of transition in the sense that we are trying to move away from the Nuremberg template of transitional justice, whereby you will arrest all those who committed atrocities. And then it was possible in Germany because the perpetrator remained in Germany and the victims were taken to another space in Israel. But what about in a country where you will need to live together? This is where it is creating problems even in Zimbabwe, whereby after the Kukurahundi, we still need to stay together. How do we stay together between somebody who killed you and who did this? This is a major problem. So if you say, therefore, let's kill all the perpetrators, already some people will actually wait for another century to say, but in this type of decade, you did this and they want to revenge. So you have a cycle of victim, perpetrator. But how do we come out of that dialectic of victim, perpetrator is by saying, let's accept that what happened was wrong. But at the same time, the thing which I want is commitment that we want to create a better society from what we are coming from. But that also, it depends whether people really come to your project with the good intentions and they actually come and they say, indeed, we agree with you. The society which we came out of was wrong. We want to build together a new political society together. And that is where the issues are. But you can tell that one of the major problems about the apartheid regime was this issue of perpetuating a fundamentalist paradigm of difference. One, black people and the white people will never be one people. That was a line which was drawn by apartheid. But it also then drew other smaller lines. A Xhosa will never be Zulu, a Zulu will never be Sotho, a Sotho will never, even a Xhosa, as it divides them into Ciskei and the Transkei, it makes all these small paradigms of difference, which today were actually suffering the consequences when they unite against whatever they see as an external person. There is always attempt to draw a boundary. I'm inside, you are outside, I'm inside, you are outside. And they are reproducing the logics of apartheid, as I said. So the major problem is when people think about liberation, but they are thinking within the stencil and the template of colonialism, then they will repeat all the dirty tricks of colonialism, and the paradigm of difference is one of the major line which cuts across from apartheid to the democratic dispensation. And the people don't see it. They see it as though they are actually pushing liberation is an issue of competition over resources, and they then misunderstand the enemy. This is where the major problem is. When you misunderstand the enemy, you are actually attacking other poor people, and they've never actually attacked those who actually have made it in South Africa, who are actually the elites. It's always about the poor people in the locations, which then shows the signs that, again, the major problem takes us back to the whole issue of pitfalls of consciousness.
So basically, that in and of itself we can't see that as true decolonization, because it reproduces difference.
It's a major question, because it even comes to me and you as products of westernized universities. One of the major issues which we need to confront genuinely is that we produce problematically, by not because of our choice. That's where we found ourselves. So it produces us as intellectuals, but it produces us as what type of intellectuals? Those who have been taught that by being educated you must move far and far and far away from your society, moving towards what is called civilization, which you will never attain because it continues to be elusive as you are moving towards it. Or the seductive nature of coloniality. Seductive nature of coloniality is that it says, forget everything which you used to be. Forget your language, forget your culture, forget your African names, forget everything, and then we'll recognize you as a human being. And then indeed we fall into that trap. We even change from Sabelo to James to whatever. We imbibe, we write books, we do all this in the hope that indeed they are going to recognize me. But the ceiling of racism is so low, you hit it every time you try to go up. And they always say, oh yes, we have written 30 books, it means we're a good academic, but you are still an African. And that angers all of us immediately. And when it angers you, what do? You then think about reconnecting with your society, which is now very far into the distance. You are no longer speaking the language which they are speaking. You are no longer eating the food which they are eating. You are actually in what Mahmoud Mamdani will call a juridical limbo. You are neither African nor European. You are actually in between. You are actually occupying what the post-colonial theorists will call a liminal space. You can't enter because of the race ceiling, but you can't go back to where you came from because you have created a chasm between the society and yourself. And then it produces these angry people. And a typical example which people can use is the issue of Leopold Sédar Senghor of Senegal, who under the system of assimilation believed fully that indeed you can be assimilated fully into the French society, to the extent that he spoke French more than the French themselves. He married a French woman. He went to stay in France, but he met racism in its raw form there. And what did he do? He then remembered the roots. And how did he remember it? He remembered by actually formulating that ideology called negritude, which is an ideology of an angry African who was moved into another direction Then he realizes that no, this direction, I think I will never reach there. But again, the distance going back is, then they say, we want to rediscover our Negroness. In other words, you want to rediscover. And how painful can it be that as a human being, one day you want to discover who you are? What happened to you which made you lose who you are? In other words, you are seated there next to yourself. You are not yourself every time. You realize that I'm no longer myself. That's what we call the ontological exiling. You exile the person even from himself or herself.
Yes. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Prof, for this. I think we're just going to try and round this up, this very critical discussion. I see Kudzade is busy taking his notes. So it clearly shows that the discussion is being well taken. Well, just to connect the entire discussion to sort of, one thing we try to do is to connect it to popular culture, to just get a sense of, at the very accessible sort of day-to-day level, how do you relate to certain, be it music, be it art, and we want to think about you to talk to us about anything that resonates to you, be it a song or that describes or carefully sort of articulates your work, or even where you are right now in terms of your headspace, in terms of where the world or where the continent and even where Zimbabwe is sitting right now.
Hey, you know, the first lighter moment is that, history as a discipline actually destroys appetite for anything except itself. You can't read the fiction when you are really into history. You'll feel like, why should I read the fiction when the reality is here? How do I read the fiction? So, but there is one, unfortunately, is a vernacular novel, which I always like more than anything else. The novel is written by the late M.M. Sibanda. He was called Mayford Sibanda. And the novel is entitled Umbiko Kamadle. It is about a civil war which took place after King Mzilikazi died. And that civil war ranged from 1868 to 1872, when Lopengula then was inaugurated as the second king, but he was not in the line because the heir apparent had disappeared. So when Lopengula came to power in 1872, he was sort of a bitter person because he was once rejected by the Ndebele themselves. So he came to power with this bitterness that there are people who don't want me. But the interesting part is the advice they gave him during the inauguration. He during the inauguration, he once asked one of the senior Khumalo chiefs, Ngumbata Khumalo, but Khumalo, how can I run this state with these people who hate me? And this Khumalo responded in a very interesting way, which actually guides all my life. Khumalo repeated it 3 times to Lopengula. He said, Lopengula, you are now the key. You are now the key. You are now the key. And those 3 times was the emphasis that Lopengula, don't think like an ordinary person. Don't think like an ordinary person. You are a king. A king will never utter such a statement that there are people who hate me. That's 1. 2, this Khumalo guy went further to say, Lopengula, as a king, people will always speak about you, not in good terms. And he says, some will insult you. And then he said to him, insults are actually the lotion for kings. That's what you use as the lotion for kings. Then the third aspect, he said, Lopengula, when you become a king,
sounds like something that the president in Zim should actually hear.
He said to King Lopengula, he said, your ears, you will hear so many things said about you. And they said, you must understand that the ears of a king are like those of a beach. You see, there is the patriarchal aspect of it, but that's what he said. He said, your ears will be like that of a beach. You will hear so many things being said about you. But that isn't the nature of being a leader. Up to today, I've run the Achimafeche Research Institute. I've been working in the Vice Chancellor's office as an executive director. I actually operate around with those principles. But what people are saying, you are a foreigner, you are whatever, I don't actually give a damn, because I say this office actually raises such questions, it provokes such questions, and I don't need not to sleep because of that. And I think it's an important lesson, really, as we move into thinking about the bigger politics, like in Zimbabwe by Mugabe, to put all these regulations. Somebody was insulting the president. If you do that, what type of a leader will people not talk about you? They will always talk about you. So I think I share this with so many of my colleagues. When I see them crying about the people were saying this about me, people were saying this about me, people were saying that, but it is in the nature of the game. If you are in a public office, that's what you are going to get. And you need to know this is your lotion, and you need to deal with that. So I found that to be really one of the best lessons in leadership than all these other things. Yeah. So that's basically my brief story. It's a brief story with the lessons for Zimbabwe.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time, Prof. It's been amazing, and this is my first interaction with you, and we are very much humbled, and thank you so much. We look forward to future interactions with you. We know you have a busy schedule, so yeah, we'll release you now to other people so they can hear all of these amazing stories.
Sure. Thank you so much. Keep well.
All right.
Sure.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.